when we try to, like, picture absolute undisputed political power. The kind of authority where a single person is building a brand new nation from the ground up, our minds instantly go to very specific visual markers.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we tend to visualize palaces, right? Gold-lined robes, heavily armed guards, and this almost untouchable physical distance from the common people.
Right, because human history has just thoroughly conditioned us to associate leadership with accumulation. I mean, the assumption is that the higher you rise in the ranks of power, the softer your cushions get.
Yeah.
And the more insulated your life becomes. That is the standard historical trajectory of how empires are built and sustained.
Exactly. But today, we are completely shattering that image because today's deep dive is entirely dedicated to exploring the life of Prophet Muhammad, the legacy of the greatest man who ever lived.
It's an incredible era to study.
It really is. We are looking specifically at this fascinating, highly transformative window of time, the Medinan period. To be precise, we are focusing on the events occurring right around the 4th year of the Hijrah, which, for those of you listening, was the pivotal migration to the city of Medina that ultimately started the Islamic calendar.
Right.
And, you know, as always on this show, we are examining this through the lens of the historical and religious texts we have. We're unpacking how these primary sources describe a leader who somehow managed to balance absolute justice with just unprecedented mercy.
And this specific era is crucial for you to understand because he was no longer operating solely as a spiritual guide, facing intense persecution back in Mecca.
Right, the dynamic had completely shifted.
Exactly. He transitioned into a statesman. I mean, he's now the head of a rapidly expanding society, tasked with managing complex military alliances, a growing economy, and a certain massive influx of state wealth.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are examining the sheer mind-blowing contrast between that immense political power and his profound personal humility.
Yeah.
And how those two things operating together literally rewired the socioeconomic and spiritual landscape of the world forever.
It really did. And to grasp the mechanics of how he built this legendary nation, it makes sense to start by zooming way in.
Right. If we want to understand the macro level statecraft, we first have to look at the micro level, like what was actually happening inside his own home.
Because the private life of a leader often serves as the most accurate blueprint for their public administration.
Totally.
The sources detail his marriages during this time, and they were deeply rooted in social welfare, not personal indulgence.
Yeah, I was looking at the accounts of his marriages, specifically to widows, like Zainab, who was highly regarded in the community and famously known as the mother of the poor because of her relentless charity.
Oh, her charity was legendary.
It was. And then there is the profoundly moving account of his marriage to Salama. I found the interaction between him and Salama in the text to be just remarkably emotionally intelligent.
It really is.
It doesn't read like a standard formal arrangement of the era at all. Like, she had recently lost her husband, Abu Salama, who she absolutely adored.
Right.
And when the Prophet proposed, she didn't respond with this automatic, overjoyed acceptance, which, frankly, you might expect given his massive status in the community.
No, she hesitated. And it's an incredibly raw exchange. She was incredibly vulnerable about the reasons why.
Yeah, she presented him with a list of genuine insecurities. She explained that she was a widow with young, dependent children. She openly confessed to having a naturally jealous disposition.
She did.
And in one specific narration, she even mentioned that she felt she was getting too old for such a union.
So just think about that. How does a head of state, the ultimate religious and political leader, respond to that kind of hesitation and insecurity?
Honestly, you'd think maybe with offense or just moving on.
Right. But he responds with absolute gentleness. He addressed every single one of her insecurities systematically, providing this profound comfort. He told her that God would alleviate her jealousy.
Wow.
He promised that her children would be fully taken care of, effectively adopting her burdens as his own responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And regarding her age, he gently noted that he was actually older than her.
That is just, it's so deeply comforting. But the detail in the sources that truly anchors this story that really blew my mind is the furniture for this wedding.
Oh, the dowry. Yes.
Yeah, let's outline what those items actually were, because this is where the contrast we talked about really hits you. The furniture for the wedding of the leader of this rapidly growing state consisted of 2 stone mills for grinding flour, 2 clay jars for water, and a pillow stuffed with dry palm leaves.
Palm leaves.
Right. Let's unpack this for a second. If we look at this from a purely geopolitical standpoint, I mean, doesn't a leader need to project strength and wealth to foreign emissaries to be taken seriously?
That's the conventional wisdom, sure.
Right. Like if a modern head of state or a billionaire CEO meets dignitaries in a room and sleeps on a mattress made of dry leaves, they look vulnerable.
They look weak.
Exactly. Okay, so let's unpack this. If he had access to state wealth, wasn't it his right to live comfortably? Why choose such intense austerity when literally no one would have questioned it?
Well, we have to look at the mechanics of soft power versus hard power. This was an entirely deliberate strategic choice on his part.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was laying the foundation for a new society. And he knew that the greatest threat to that society wasn't necessarily a foreign army, it was internal corruption.
Oh, wow. Okay.
By sleeping on a palm leaf pillow while managing the wealth of a nation, he was setting a practical emotional standard. He was demonstrating to his followers that leadership in this new society was fundamentally about service and sacrifice.
Not the accumulation of luxury.
Exactly. It functioned as an inoculation against the corrupting nature of power. The message was crystal clear. You can hold the resources of the world in your hands, but you must actively refuse to let those resources enter your heart.
That is profound. But that internal standard of rejecting worldly vanity, it requires shifting the whole society's mindset, right? You can't just mandate humility from the top down.
No, you really can't.
So how did that deliberate distaste for harshness and luxury actually shape the culture and administration he was building?
The sources show us how it actively bled into everyday cultural practices, starting with something as fundamental as naming conventions.
Right, the story of his grandson's birth. I love this one.
Yeah. During this same year his grandson is born, the family brings the infant to him and announces they have named the child Harb.
Which translates directly to war,
Exactly.
which is a very typical aggressive pre-Islamic tribal name, right? The culture clearly valued toughness and intimidation above all else.
Right, but the prophet immediately rejected that harshness. He changed the baby's name from Harb to Hassan.
Meaning beautiful or kind.
Yes, meaning beautiful, kind, or excellent. And this wasn't just, a grandfather's personal preference. It was a societal pivot.
A pivot away from aggression.
Completely. For generations, the surrounding culture glorified aggression and tribal dominance. By actively renaming his grandson Hassan, he was signaling that the new cultural ideal wasn't violence or intimidation. It was the pursuit of beauty, peace, and excellence of character.
But how does that pursuit of excellence translate into the actual administration of the state? Because, I mean, it's one thing to value beauty and kindness, but running a growing nation requires highly competent people executing really complex tasks.
Well, we see that competence in the sheer, awe-inspiring motivation he inspired in his followers.
Oh, you're talking about Zayd.
Yes. As the state grew, he urgently needed someone to handle highly sensitive diplomatic correspondence.
Securely, yeah.
Right. He couldn't rely on outside translators for state secrets, so he tasked a young companion named Zayd with learning Hebrew.
And Zayd didn't just learn a few conversational phrases. He mastered the entire language, reading, writing, and comprehending a completely foreign tongue. And he did it in just 15 days.
15 days. It's staggering.
If you are listening to this right now, I mean, just imagine trying to learn a completely foreign language from scratch in 2 weeks just because your mentor asked you to.
Right. Think about the cognitive load of that task. We are talking about internalizing a new syntax, new grammar, a completely different alphabet.
What kind of leader inspires that level of dedication?
The underlying mechanism here is the sheer gravitational respect he commanded. I mean, people do not achieve that level of cognitive hyperfocus out of fear of a tyrant.
No, absolutely not.
They achieve it out of an overwhelming dedication to a mission they deeply believe in. He created an environment where striving for intellectual excellence was literally the highest form of devotion.
That is just, it's mind-blowing. But, dedication and strict adherence to principles are relatively easy to maintain in peacetime.
Oh, for sure.
The real ultimate test of any leader's system is how it holds up under pressure. Establishing a culture of justice is one thing, but how does that justice operate when it is met with a shocking betrayal?
And that takes us to the rule of law in Medina, which the texts outline as incredibly strict and strictly impartial.
Yeah, to understand the baseline here, there was this incident where a Muslim mistakenly killed 2 men. He believed they were from a hostile tribe, but it turned out these specific men were actually protected under a peace treaty.
Right, a massive diplomatic crisis.
Exactly. And showing legendary integrity, the prophet didn't attempt to cover up the mistake. He didn't invoke state immunity or anything like that. He immediately insisted on paying their blood money.
Which was the customary financial compensation.
Right. He proved that justice applied to everyone, regardless of faith or tribal affiliation.
And that sets the exact stage for the betrayal.
Yes. So, to pay this heavy financial compensation, the texts describe him going to the Jewish tribe of Banu Nadir because they had a mutual assistance treaty explicitly designed to help with things like blood money. That's exactly.
He sits down outside one of their fortress walls, and their leaders tell him, "Sure, we'll gather the funds, just wait here." But while he is waiting, they secretly plot to assassinate him.
Right. The plan is to have a man climb to the top of the wall and drop a massive stone directly onto him.
Which is just a complete violation of their treaty.
It's an act of high treason, a calculated attempt to decapitate the leadership of the Islamic State in a single move.
But, according to the historical accounts, the prophet was warned of this plot by divine revelation. So he stands up, remains completely calm, and just walks away. He heads back to the center of Medina.
And you have to realize, any other historical leader in that region, upon surviving an assassination attempt by an allied tribe.
Oh, they would immediately launch a bloodbath.
Absolutely. They would send an army to slaughter the perpetrators as a deterrent.
But instead of initiating a bloodbath, he prioritizes avoiding bloodshed. He sends an envoy with a 10-day notice. Just a decree saying, you broke the treaty, you have 10 days to pack up your belongings and leave the land safely. He provides them a totally bloodless exit strategy.
Right. And the sources indicate they were actually preparing to take that out. They were packing up. But then this hypocrite leader, a man named Abdullah ibn Ubay, sends them a secret message.
Yes.
He urges them not to leave, giving them false promises. He says, if you stay and fortify, I have 2,000 men who will back you up.
And seduced by these false promises, the Banu Nadir tear up the eviction notice, retreat into their massive fortresses, and basically dare the Muslim army to attack.
Because they were banking on their geography, right? They had food, water, and situated just outside their fortresses were their prized, incredibly valuable palm tree groves.
Which formed the absolute backbone of their agricultural wealth. They were prepared for a drawn-out siege.
So the siege begins, and shocker, the 2,000 men promised by Abdullah ibn Ubay never show up.
Never show up. The hypocrites abandon them completely.
But the Banu Nadir remains stubborn. That is, until the prophet introduces a tactical twist that completely baffles the enemy to end the siege quickly. He orders his men to begin cutting down and burning some of those prized palm trees.
It's a massive shift in paradigm.
Wait, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's pause here. You just told me earlier he hated harshness.
Right.
It's well known he generally strictly forbade the destruction of nature or property in conflict. He had clear rules against harming trees. So why break his own rule here? Why destroy the agriculture?
Because it reveals a profound strategic doctrine at play regarding the limits of tolerance.
Okay, unpack that.
Yes. Islam established highly tolerant, progressive rules of engagement to protect innocent life and property. However, it refuses to let that ethical framework be weaponized against it. The Banu Nadir were explicitly exploiting his known mercy. They knew he despised destroying property, so they planned to sit comfortably behind their walls indefinitely, relying on those very palm groves to sustain them post-siege.
Right, all while having just committed high treason. So by burning the trees, he essentially broke their psychological will.
That is a highly accurate way to put it. He demonstrated that while he vastly prefers preservation, his ethical rules cannot be used as a shield for betrayal. He showed them their long-term economic future was literally going up in smoke.
And that forced a rapid surrender.
Exactly, which ultimately prevented a massive loss of human life on both sides. He sacrificed agricultural assets to save human lives.
That is brilliant. So the strategy works. They surrender and they leave the city, and the scene of their departure is just surreal. Because they were so proud, they proudly played tambourines and sang to hide their shame as they marched out.
A facade of immense pride.
Yeah. But their departure leaves behind something that sets the stage for perhaps the prophet's most brilliant socioeconomic and spiritual decrees, because they left behind massive agricultural wealth.
Yes, vast farms and date groves.
Which introduces this concept of fay, F-A-I. It's wealth acquired without a battle. So the prophet is suddenly the custodian of immense riches. He could have built that palace we talked about in the beginning.
He could have upgraded from the palm leaf pillow, definitely.
But instead of enriching himself, he used this vast new wealth to solve Medina's biggest humanitarian crisis.
because the economic strain on the city was unsustainable.
Right. For those listening, remember, the impoverished emigrants, the muhajirun, had fled Mecca with nothing. And the local helpers, the Ansar, had literally been housing them, splitting their own farms down the middle.
It was an incredible display of brotherhood, but it was an unprecedented economic crisis.
Exactly. So the prophet takes this fey wealth and he gives the farms entirely to the impoverished emigrants. This allowed them to finally move out of the homes of the helpers and become financially independent.
And the helpers, demonstrating their own generosity, fully agreed to this. The prophet took nothing for his personal treasury.
He permanently lifted a massive segment of his population out of poverty. But as the Banu Nadir left, this awe-inspiring climax to the story happens. A deeply emotional situation arises.
Right, the situation with the children.
Yeah. Some of the local Arab families, the Ansar, had children who had been raised Jewish. This was due to old pre-Islamic vows where mothers would swear to raise a child Jewish if they survived infancy.
You can immediately see the impending crisis here.
The parents are panicking. They are devout Muslims now, standing there watching their own flesh and blood preparing to march out of the city forever with the Banu Nadir.
It's heartbreaking.
The parents desperately wanted to force their kids to stay and become Muslims so the families wouldn't be torn apart. They pleaded with the prophet to let them physically restrain their children.
And if you consider the era where tribal loyalty and parental authority were absolute, you'd fully expect a leader to agree, to say, yes, keep them here, assimilate them.
Right. But the prophet's response was this mind-blowing revelation. He decreed, there is no compulsion in religion.
There is no compulsion in religion. It is a stunning, paradigm-shifting directive.
He looked at these desperate parents and decreed that they had to let their children choose. If the children chose to leave with the Jewish tribe, they had to be allowed to go. The state would not allow faith to be forced.
The magnitude of why this is so legendary cannot be overstated. He established that genuine faith and individual freedom of conscience superseded even the deepest, most primal family bonds.
He protected the religious freedom of a demographic aligned with a tribe that just tried to assassinate him.
Exactly, ensuring that even in exile, their followers remained with them by choice, not by state coercion.
Wow. So if you're listening to this and trying to synthesize all these events, just look at this brief window of time. We see a leader who slept on a palm leaf pillow while managing the wealth of a nation.
Yeah.
A man who detested harsh names, who inspired followers to achieve the impossible, like learning a language in 15 days, and who established a breathtaking standard of religious freedom even when it broke the hearts of his own devoted followers.
And the societal refinement continued too. I should add one last note of societal reform from this era, this same period, saw the final complete prohibition of alcohol.
Oh, right.
Which functioned as the ultimate purification of the society he was building, shedding destructive habits for profound discipline.
It really is the ultimate purification. It leaves us with a final provocative thought to ponder today. If a single leader could permanently transform a society's wealth, its familial structures, and its deepest moral compass, all while living a life of voluntary poverty and insisting that faith can never be forced. What does that say about how we define true power and influence today? Are we measuring global influence by the resources a leader accumulates, or by the freedoms they are willing to fiercely protect?